Hi everyone, welcome to week 10 of TESOL Methods with Field Experience. I wanted to talk just a little bit about what's happening this week and recap what happened in weeks 8 and 9. In week 8, you all took your midterm exams. Congratulations for getting that finished and accomplishing that. And hopefully, I think most of you figured out that initially when you submitted your exam, it graded it right away, and some of your grades seemed lower than what you suspected you had earned. And that was because the computer does not grade the essay portion and instead factors in a 0 initially until I can go through and and grade the essays and give you what you actually earned on those. And so I have done that, and hopefully you all have noticed that your grades are probably more along the lines of what you feel you earned, given the hard work that you put into them. So hopefully that's the case for everyone. Midterm grades, mid-semester grades were submitted by me, and I did that for everyone. So regardless of whether you were possibly struggling and need to sort of step it up a little bit by the end of the semester to improve your grade, or whether you've done quite well this semester, you've given all the effort that you needed to, you've participated, submitted your assignments, etc., and you're doing quite well, everyone had a grade submitted as to what your status is at this point academically. And it should not have been a surprise to you. It correlated to what your average is per Brightspace. So hopefully there were no surprises there. Last week you worked on a few topics, error correction and some authentic materials that you can use, storytelling, songs, and rhymes. And as it pertains to error correction and what we should be aware of as second language instructors, or English as a second language, more specifically instructors, is, we have a lot of questions to ask ourselves as teachers, and it really does become a bit of an instinctual process, or it basically becomes important for a teacher to be able to, in the moment, take in quite a few factors. So our options are, do we error correct? If so, how do we error correct? Do we explicitly correct an error? Do we prompt? Do we recast? Do we create an activity so that there's peer feedback and peers are helping to correct errors? Do we create an activity that fosters self-correction and realization of, what might have been wrong and being able to fix that? So what do we decide to do? What is going to cause the least anxiety? What is going to foster or incite the student to want to improve and feel comfortable and motivated by the new information that comes from, having tried something, realizing that you didn't do it quite right, and being able to move on? We have to take in quite a few factors, and for the most part it has to do with what is our goal in doing or having the students complete the activity that they might be doing when these errors are happening. It has to do with what level our students are at. It has to do with our students, again, comfort level, the personalities of the students involved. So there are several things that we need to factor in, and our clarity as well. Students, it is well researched that English as a second language students do appreciate clarity in message and in instruction. So we kind of have to weigh all of those factors and make a decision in those moments as to how we're going to correct. Sometimes we can build those things into activities, but oftentimes we are put in a position where we need to make those decisions quickly. To a certain extent, we get a sense from practice, from being in these situations and having seen how they've played out, what we should do. But also, the more informed we are through courses like this and by keeping ourselves aware through self-reflection of what we should be doing for our students and keeping ourselves aware through research, we can make our best estimation as to how we should do it. At least that's my 2 cents. In terms of storytelling, songs, and rhymes, there's a couple things I want to say. So we can certainly use these things because they're fun, to get our students involved, to get them motivated. our preschool students, our elementary students, even our middle school students, they're going to enjoy the nature of these types of activities. They can be kinesthetic in nature, they can be auditory, visual. We can even branch them out in some ways as being tactile. We can make them interpersonal. We can do all kinds of things with them. And if we can address what our students need in all different ways rather than just, through written assignments or through traditional lecture and things like that, of course that's going to be beneficial to our students. We also want to incorporate as many authentic materials as we can, and of course the stories of our culture, the songs of our culture, etc. Those are going to be helpful in creating or incorporating authentic materials so that our students can understand and really get a sense of their L2 culture. That's going to be important, and it's going to be helpful. In terms of grammar and pronunciation and such, we can be working on slang, we can be working on idioms, we can be working on segmentation, blending. There are a whole bunch of skills that we can be working on for our students in that way as well. But one thing I want to mention that some people may not have thought of is that sometimes we think of these types of things, these types of activities, as pertaining more so for younger students, that we don't want to belittle our older students or, give them things that they're not going to be interested in, or maybe they may even think is sort of babyish. But if presented in the right way, we can actually make them feel more comfortable about the culture that they are trying to incorporate themselves into. So basically what we can do is allow them sort of a window into the background knowledge or the background experience that we as Americans, people who have lived in this country for all of our lives or most of our lives, have. So for example, thinking about storytelling, if you see, if someone mentions something about having to climb up a beanstalk, or someone in the class makes a joke about, oh, did you lose your glass slipper, or did you lose your shoe at midnight? We're all going to know what those things are allusions to. We're going to understand the references. Our students may not. So we can present some of these materials, some of these stories, some of these rhymes, almost as history lessons. And as I said, it allows them to understand background knowledge about our culture, have a frame of reference, if you will, that they didn't have before. And so the next time they hear that reference, they're going to be in the know just like their American friends and feel more comfortable and confident and included. And the better those things are for them, the more they're going to try to use the language, try to have reciprocal conversations with others and things of that nature. So we can utilize these things for children as much as we can for adults. We just need to do it in a respectful and mindful way. Last week for your assignments, I had you create a video and I also had you take a quiz. And the only thing I wanted to note about those things is that the video I asked you to do, not only because I thought it would be interesting for you to demonstrate an activity through that video, but I wanted you to get a little bit of practice because the lesson plan will eventually be coming up and it has a video component. So we can sort of work out the kinks during this smaller scale assignment, hopefully, and get you some practice for that larger scale lesson plan that you'll be doing later. And the same goes for the quiz. It is a true-false quiz, and guess what your final is going to be? It is going to be totally comprised of true and false questions. So again, some practice for things to come. So that's why I have you working on those last week as your assignments. Now this week, we are working on goals, objectives, and outcomes. And gosh, those are important in so many ways. Important for our regular ed students, certainly our special ed students, and of course, for our ESOL or ESL students for sure. So we want to understand for anything, what is the goal that we have for our students? What is the outcome that we hope our students will demonstrate without outcomes, we really can't even have an assessment. Our outcomes have to directly correlate, or rather, excuse me, I should reverse that. Our assessments need to directly correlate to the outcomes that we have already set. If not, our assessments are flawed. We don't have a direction to why we are having our students complete these assessments, why we are asking them these questions. And the same goes for our lessons. We have to have goals for our lessons. And, to build to those goals, we need to have objectives or benchmarks that they're going to meet in order to meet those goals. Without that direction, our lessons become somewhat meaningless. We really need to have goals and objectives in mind and concretely written down in our lesson plans and our curriculum, our unit plans, etc., in order to know that we have developed a quality plan for our students. Guidelines from WIDA, some information from WIDA. WIDA is the term comes from an acronym that had to do with the first states that agreed to be in a consortium that basically determined some standards and created levels and other information pertaining to English as a second language students. And now, at this point, we have over 50%, if not possibly, I think 75% of our states in the United States subscribing to WIDA's standards and WIDA's principles that it has lined up and spelled out. So I have WIDA's information for you. It is extensive, so I'm really looking for you to just familiarize yourself with it, kind of skim through it, and certainly pay more attention to the standards that they have set and the levels that they've determined for individuals, students probably, who have come into our country and are progressing through English with the language. And one of the reasons why WIDA is so important, as I said, so many states have basically said, we agree with WIDA. We will maintain their standards as our standards. And one of those states is the state that Eastern University is found in, Pennsylvania. So you will notice when you see Pennsylvania's standards and the levels that Pennsylvania has set for the different proficiency levels for students, ESL students in our state, you'll notice that they perfectly match. They directly correlate to WIDA's standards and WIDA's levels. So that's not an accident. It's because they agree with WIDA just as so many states, Delaware, New Jersey, etc., around us do. So it's a great thing to understand. WIDA is also the group that has created the testing that determines the initial proficiency, basically the initial level that each student is going to be as he or she is placed in our public school system. So really about some valuable information. For this week, you will also be creating a couple discussions. One is going to ask you to work in a pair, and with your partner, you're going to really kind of take a look at what actual school systems have mentioned as their missions, for their second language learners of English, and what their programs have. And you, now being the expert, having looked at some of this information, having studied TESOL and having looked at what WIDA has to say and having thought about goals and objectives and outcomes, you are going to determine the quality of that school district. So that's really going to help you in preparing for your lesson plan that's coming up. And also what should help you is you're going to be creating an activity, and that certainly will be along the lines of what's going to be happening when you create your lesson plan. So many of these activities that I'm asking you to do during the weeks, not only are they helping you work with the information that you've learned about each week, but I'm hoping that they will help you in preparing for what's coming the following week, and this week is no different. So with that said, the only other thing I want to mention is that in a couple weeks, your observation assignment with reflection is due. So hopefully you are well underway in working with that. Your article reviews have been graded. I actually have a teaching assistant, and she graded most of yours. I did grade some, but she graded most of them, and she has completed those. So we are just moving along in our semester. And I appreciate, as always, your effort. I look forward to seeing the work that you submit in the coming weeks. and I wish you a wonderful week this week. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.